Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, Digitize or Deteriorate. You're very welcome. My name is Niamh Lorden and I'm the Head of Marketing here at FlowForma. Delighted you can join us today. And before we get started, I'll just share a few tips for participating in today's webinar. But please note, this webinar is being recorded. If you need any assistance during the webinar, please email info@flowforma.com for assistance. Your lines are muted as an attendee, but I highly encourage you to ask questions via the chat function in GoToWebinar. We have a 10-minute slot at the end of this webinar designated to a live questions and answer session. After the webinar, we will share the recording, and we'd really appreciate if you could complete a short survey to let us know how you thought the webinar went. Okay, so next up, I'm going to introduce our speakers. So delighted to be joined today by Rob Koplowitz, VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester. Hi Rob, thanks for joining us.
Hi Niamh, thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you today. I know our community are really interested to hear your insights, Rob, to the recent Forrester Process Automation Survey and all the results there. I know even more so they want to hear firsthand your tips for digitizing in 2021, so thanks for joining us. We're also joined by Paul Stone today. So Paul is our product strategist here at FlowForma. Hi, Paul.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here.
Thanks, Paul. So I know Paul is going to share some exciting FlowForma customer success case studies, which line up really well with what Rob is seeing in his Forrester research. So without further ado, I will pass over to Rob. So Rob, let me just give you access to advance your slides now.
Thank Niamh, and thank everybody. Thanks to everybody that's joining today. I guess I was a little bit more forceful in my title here rather than digitize or deteriorated. I have digitized guy, which may well be the case. There is a process imperative that we're all faced with right now, and I think we've been faced with it now for quite a number of years. But I think really the heat has been turned up. It's become far more critical. The data is going to indicate that we're going to go through here shortly, but really the circumstances I think are maybe even more of what's driving this phenomenon right now. So so what really is going on here? It's there we go. Honestly, it's something we've been talking about now for a while, that we have to start thinking about automation at scale, that automation has to get out of the back room, it has to get out of its kind of BPM, big project roots, and start to become something that is pervasive throughout the organization, something that everyone is participating in, and where you're really aggressively going after all of the manual processes in your organization. So how long has this conversation been going on? Certainly now for quite a number of years, but we've made progress. The data show that we've made progress, but come around February, March timeframe, things got very real in terms of our tests for our agility. Can we really respond to unforeseen circumstances? Can we really automate things really quickly? Mission critical that we do so. And the test, of course, was COVID. And COVID, created a lot of stress on a lot of organizations. A lot of processes became problematic very quickly, and it tested our ability to respond. And it did it across all sectors, right? So we saw this across financial services, we saw it across insurance, we saw it across care, across public services. And some of the case studies that you're going to see later from Paul will emphasize some of those exact dynamics that we saw happening. We had the opportunity to ask folks, specifically when COVID hit, and specifically when you went to a remote work model, what happened, right? Because we were inundated with calls, right? Suddenly we had calls coming in to Forrester about things that were broken. How do we get them back online as quickly as possible? And lo and behold, the survey data says 2/3 of organizations encountered broken processes. 2/3 of organizations had processes that either were broken or suboptimal. And some of these processes were very, very mission critical. They were serving patients, they were serving clients, they were involved in revenue recognition, they were involved in moving major projects forward. And so we had to react incredibly quickly. And it was a test, it was a forcing function. So, you know, when we think about COVID, when we think about our ability to react, those that were digitized reacted far more effectively. Those who were far down the path of driving an automation strategy and had a foundation in place for doing that did okay, right? They were able to react. They had the tools and the techniques and the methodologies in place in order to be able to react and be agile. But, you know, what is digital? Well, we think of digital as software being an expression of the business. It is actually putting the tools in place that allow everyone in your business to be able to drive efficiencies at a basic level, but to be able to drive innovation through automation and through software. And software is simply far more resilient than things like paper processes in a situation like the one that we were facing. So what do we think about, you know, when we think about moving forward with this? You know, what have we learned and what do we have to do now? Well, the answer is pretty much what we have to do to accelerate the path that many of us have already been on. And it's that path towards digitization and path towards that really wide scale, long tail of digitization that we've all been pursuing now for quite a while. So, you know, so what did we learn? We learned that you can't function without automation. Operation and processes requiring paper, requiring people to move things like spreadsheets around when they're co-located. They are very vulnerable to breakdown. They are very vulnerable to being problematic. And there's a lot of them. And we've talked about COVID a lot here. And I want to put it in perspective and just talk about how we think about COVID at Forrester. And, you know, certainly, you know, it's a tragedy. It's a terrible thing that happened. But is it the last terrible thing? Is it the last challenge that you're going to be facing? Is it the last pandemic? I don't know. I certainly hope so. But, you know, but what are the other things that are going to force you to have to be far more agile and adaptable than you ever had to be in the past? Is it geopolitical? Is it a digital predator who's entering your market? Is it simply higher demands coming from your customers? We know that there are a lot of forcing functions. We've been talking about them for years. And then COVID shows up and it's the forcing function of all forcing functions. But think of it as a test, an automation, digitization one, right? So we've been thinking now for a long time, you know, do we have to automate everything? You know, is it really that important? You know, how much cost can we take out? Well, this test proved those that are more automated were actually far more effective in dealing with this situation. You know, the other piece of this that I think is very relevant here is that you not only have to automate, but you have to build your automation on a foundation that's adaptable. So, you know, what are we talking about when we think about adaptable? Well, there are certain things that folks are moving towards very aggressively. They're moving toward cloud platforms. Cloud platforms actually were far more resilient than, you know, and far more able to scale than those who, you know, who were still dependent on internal IT systems. When suddenly, you know, your workload as a result of something that customers require immediately triples, you know, are you able to scale effectively? Well, you know, probably more so if you're in an infrastructure that is designed to scale. Are you able to build things really quickly? Can you build software without going out hiring professional developers? We can't find anyway. You know, are you able to, you know, to put processes in place quickly and very close to the business user? You know, these are things like LowCode and digital process automation, and all this is happening around a background of you know, DevOps and modern applications. You know, people moving to modern application architecture. So we see a lot of things moving, but what we saw very clearly was this more adaptable foundation was the winning formula. And in the case of the adaptable foundation, you know, why was that so important? Let's just sort of take a step back and say, why are people doing process improvement? What is the goal of this? You know, COVID was a forcing function. We tactically had to react. But strategically, what were we trying to accomplish prior to this? Well, it's interesting because we've been tracking this data now for about 5 years, and we actually had the opportunity here to capture it right before COVID hit and right after COVID hit. So we got kind of a before and after snapshot. But when we ask folks, what is the primary focus of your process improvement efforts? The primary focus, not the only focus, but the primary focus. What we see is most folks are focusing on either accelerating digital business transformation. This is the digital business that we were talking about just moments ago. And a number of them are doing it specifically to improve customer experience. And when you see customer here, read patient, read citizen, read employees, as well as customers, those folks who are critical to the journeys that your software provides. We also had a chance to take another snapshot after COVID, right? Processes broke, that was one. That was one major factor that changed as a result of it. But the other thing was we entered a more difficult economic climate, and that could potentially affect budgets as well. So, so what was really going to change? Were folks going to remain focused on these strategic objectives? The blue lines that you see here happened after we started seeing the impact of COVID. And as you can see, the strategic objectives remained largely the same. Folks remained focused around process for accelerating their digital business transformation, improving customer experience. We did see this jump, just about a little more than doubling around focus on cost reduction. We actually expected that to jump a lot more, and it doubled, a little more than doubled from a small base. Just a quick comment on that bottom line item, cost reduction. What is interesting about that, we don't have the data here today, but when we ask folks specifically, remember, we're asking what is the primary objective of process improvement here. But we ask specifically, are you expecting cost reduction as a result of process improvement? And are you planning on measuring it? We get about 77% of folks that say, yes, absolutely. Cost reduction is an expectation of what we're doing in terms of moving forward. So it's not an either or, but the primary objective to driving towards digital transformation is a far more powerful goal on the part of the organization than cost reduction is. Cost reduction tends to happen in silos. Digital transformation and customer experience tends to happen across the organization, requires a much higher level of cooperation and generates a much higher level of impact when done effectively. So this is a big moment. We've been tracking it for a while. How big is the imperative? How much is out there that remains to be done? We kind of tend to have this focus on, we've got these big bang, application implementations we do and big BPM projects, and those remain important. But what else is going out there? What is the long tail of things that you're trying to automate? And this is a daunting task. This is really big. So how many people still have dependencies on paper, which was the thing that broke most completely and most quickly when we moved to remote office? You couldn't move the file folder between the desks. You couldn't monitor the mailroom. There was nobody there. And if these things were important in terms of customer onboarding, in terms of revenue recognition, in terms of serving, citizens that now needed your help more than ever, in terms of recalibrating how you handle patient care almost on a dime, these paper processes were the first to break, and they broke the most. And as you can see, 77% of the folks still have at least a few dependencies on paper processes. Well, a few doesn't seem like very many. But if that paper process, if that inefficient file folder that's being passed around is in the middle of a larger automated process, the process breaks, and it breaks completely. So suddenly those became very important to address. And then, the other thing that we've been after for many years now is all these things that are happening in spreadsheets. If we go out to the business and we say, these are the tools that we're giving you to drive efficiency, these are the tools that we're giving you to drive automation, these are the tools that we're giving you to ultimately drive innovation, what do we give them? We give them spreadsheets and we give them email, and those are fundamentally offline. They are inefficient. They are non-visible within the overall context of the process. They are not part of your managed platform. And if we put these two together, just these two, along with all the other automation requirements we have a massive amount of automation that we're facing in order to be more adaptable in the future, in order to be a truly digitized business. Oops, a little heavy on the finger there. So I want to talk just quickly about no-code and low-code. There seems to be some confusion in the market about these things, and probably some of it's been generated by Forrester and other people. But there is a difference. There is a difference in terms of how you should think about these two worlds. So no-code are platforms that are designed to build applications. They are designed to build very powerful applications. They are not trivial. They are not situational. You can build very powerful applications on no-code platforms. But who is building them? They're designed for citizens, business developers in your organization to be able to take the reins and build out those automations with minimal support from IT and with minimal support from professional developers, ideally none. And when I say ideally none, that's a design criteria from folks like FlowForma and others who are building the software that says, if this is a piece of functionality that you need, I need to build it into a no-code way of putting it out in a declarative way that a business user can use it the way they would use an Excel spreadsheet. One pattern. The second pattern is low code. Low code, you can build a lot of applications with a business developer on low code, but the design criteria, the philosophy on the part of the vendors is that ultimately the most sophisticated applications can be built with the help of professional developers, and sort of the interplay between the professional developer and the business developer becomes very important. But there's always this kind of escape hatch. If it becomes increasingly sophisticated, I hand it over to the professional developers. If you don't have professional developers available, then you have to think more about low code or about no code. I'm sorry. So they're very similar. The overlap is certainly significant. They're often conflated in terms of the minds of the market, but they're very different. And I would argue that the biggest difference is the philosophy of the vendors and where they put their R&D resources to actually, if you're going no code, everything has to be built in a way that is accessible without code. And so there are different criteria here. In terms of the evolution of the workforce, what did we give them? How did we give them, the ability to automate? We gave them paper. Paper was great, right? Fill out your forms. Then we gave them printers, so you can make even prettier forms. Then we gave them spreadsheets, and that's basically where we've been living now for about 20 years in terms of the tools that we've given to our business people within our organization. Now we're moving into this world of citizen development. And why citizen development is important is it allows folks to bring these processes online. So I'm not just automating it, I'm automating it, and I'm automating it online into a managed platform where I can manage it, where I have visibility into it. It's a rather significant change, and I think it's fairly important in terms of digitizing an organization from end to end. I'm sorry, my slides keep jumping more than I want them to. We see a number of governance models that are emerging around this. So, probably there's some people in the audience saying, I can't let everybody develop software. My heavens, things will break. People don't know how to do this. That's okay. Think about this in terms of providing guardrails, in terms of doing this carefully and methodically. We've seen a number of models emerging. The first we call privateer, which is, just let everybody build what they want. Let the business team execute projects with their own resources. The second one is democratization. Let this bottom-up development take place. Provide as few guardrails as you can in order to encourage, wide-scale adoption. The model I think that's probably going to end up being the winner is this federation model, where you have a COE. You have folks that pick tools. They pick tools based upon things like governance capabilities that are built into the tool. How easy is it to develop? How can I train people on using it? You have this center of excellence model where folks are out to be ambassadors out to the business, teach other people how to use the product, be available back for some consultation later. But ultimately, what happens is you end up with this long tail of developers that can build a wide range of applications, but IT is very, very highly involved. And this brings some stress to the vendors to make sure that they're giving you products that IT can approve, that they understand the security, and that they understand how to govern it, they understand privacy within the environment. And across that environment, they can provide support that will allow you to build the class of applications that will allow the business to drive innovation and to drive automation, but do it in a safe way and do it in a way that actually meets the overall strategic goals of the organization. So, these are emerging. The imperative of having to do, this long tail of automation, I think is pretty unambiguous at this point. And I think we're all on this journey of how is our organization going to go about supporting those things. So this is active. I would take a step back and say it's become a lot more active since COVID, right? So, so the idea that we were experimenting with these things, we were kind of tending to have sort of some very limited democratization model back in December, January timeframe. Suddenly, people have gotten very serious about making decisions. These low-code, no-code platforms have become first-class citizens in the development portfolio, and then we need to learn how to leverage those. So that's become a big focus. It is an organizational goal. So what changes here is IT is no longer in charge. They no longer have the reins on every project you do. So with that in mind, process expertise is back in vogue. We have folks out there who understand how to build processes and how to optimize processes. These are your process professionals. The business, which we've hammered on during the course of this last 20 minutes, becomes partners in developing these applications. Your governance, risk, and compliance people there on the lower right, your GRC professionals, they're very important. When you automate, you will fundamentally improve your governance, risk, and compliance stance. Don't bring them in at the end. Bring them in at the beginning. They're partners in this because they have a lot to gain from automating processes and making them visible, making them transparent, and making them auditable. Customer experience professionals become an important part of this. If you're building something that is going to be either used by a wide number of your employees or potentially citizens or customers or patients, then obviously there's a customer service aspect to this, and it has to be considered. These things cross organizational boundaries. Your processes don't respect your organizational boundaries. They don't respect your legacy technology. That requires high-level sponsorship in the organization to set the strategic goals and make these initiatives imperative. And the last one I really want to talk about on this chart is the change manager. So everybody's happy with developing spreadsheets, right? We're all happily working in Excel every day. We weren't always happy doing that. Somebody taught us how to do it. Somebody standardized on the tools for us to do it. Somebody taught us how to use this crazy thing called email. And these folks manage change management. The same type of diligence is going to have to be brought to bear around the concept of no code and the concept of the citizen developer. So what I want to do is just leave you with a few quick thoughts and recommendations on how you should think about this going forward. So first off, assess your ability to drive automation very quickly. Can your organization react in near real time? Did your organization react in near real time when it had to, when COVID hit? And are your business people partners in driving your automation? Extremely difficult to build software under the best of circumstances in the old-fashioned way. But now think about it where your stakeholders, your business people, are remote workers who are trying to deal with these situations themselves. Are they partners? Can they help you drive your software strategy forward? Assume that rapid and agile is the new normal. Again, COVID, it was a terrible thing, but it was a forcing function. It was a test for many of us. Think about business people as your new development superpower. But with great power comes great responsibility. So, think about those folks as partners, but govern them, pick tools that allow you to work with them, and make sure that what they do is serving the greater need of the organization and is certainly not introducing any risk. And this is more than possible. And make this the speed of business, because if it's not a pandemic, if it's not geopolitical, if it's not some sort of environmental issue, it's probably going to be a digital competitor or the demands of the marketplace that are going to ask you to be able to move much more quickly. And then lastly, take a holistic approach. Make business process optimization a core strength of your organization. Always think about how you can be doing things better. Work with those professionals that understand it, but connect that optimization to automation. Is the answer always automation? No, it's not always automation, but guess what? More often than not, it's automation. And never stop. Make this part of your organizational DNA. So with that, what I want to do is stop right here. Thank everybody for listening for 20 minutes or so, and then turn it over to Paul for some case studies.
Thanks, Rob. So I will just give Paul access now to share his slides. Perfect.
That's great, Rob.
Insightful,
Thanks.
Rob.
That's great, Rob. Thanks for those insights. As always, very interesting to see what is coming out of Forrester research and what the future might look like. So now I'd like to talk about a little bit about our case studies. And what you'll find is that what people are actually doing with a no-code tool closely matches what Rob is suggesting would be an approach for the future with many organizations. So what we're going to do is look at how FlowForma users are using FlowForma to digitize their processes. First up, I'm just going to talk a little bit about FlowForma. Just to describe what it is for those of you that don't know, FlowForma is a no-code digital process automation tool. It's a little different to others in the market because it takes the approach of combining three things into one. And there are three areas of system functionality: workflow, document generation, document handling, and forms capturing data, that together represent a lot of processing apps that are out there at the moment. So what we do is we combine those three things together, because in a business developer's mind, that's what they're thinking. They're thinking about what data do I need to capture to complete this task? What is the next task in the process? Who's going to be allocated to it? What documentation needs to be generated along the way? What communications need to be sent out, and so on. So what we do is combine all of that together into one single end user interface. And what that means is that that business user can find the system very easy to adopt, because all the information that they need is right there in front of them in that single user interface. And the workflow, the documentation, the data, as I say, is all combined together. We also combine that together in our no-code configuration tool. So we have a true no-code configuration tool where you can quickly set up steps in a process, set up data, set up business rules that automate and assist the business end user, such as generating an email or pushing or pulling information out of a back-end system, for example, all using no-code. And the benefit of using no-code is that you can train users up quickly. Business people don't have time. You need to be able to get them up and running as quickly as possible, and they need to be getting results as quickly as possible, getting it into the business user's hands so that you're ultimately achieving that ROI by the business user adopting your solution. So our no-code functionality and our 3-in-1 approach are key differentiators for us that enable clients to get value from the system as quickly as possible and achieve that panacea of having those business developers build all the systems themselves, so that, hey, you don't need IT anymore. And now, of course, you do need IT. IT got to maintain infrastructure and so on, but a little bit more about that later on. The platform as well operates on top of Office 365, and that's very important because it's very easy to install, very easy to get up and running. And again, the faster you get things up and running, get people trained up, the quicker you achieve that ROI. And let's talk about some actual use cases out there. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine and how they use FlowForma to accelerate their digital transformation. Now, Liverpool School are a large school that specializes in tropical medicine. They teach students, they have over 600 students, but they're also an important worldwide center of excellence and a research institution that works with other research institutions throughout the world. They have several areas where they are defined as the de facto standard, like they are, I know they're working on coming up with the universal snakebite venom, for example. So they're doing some pretty important research. However, they're an academic institution. They've been around for over 120 years, and they were very dependent on paper-based processes. Every time we needed to do anything, like let's say a researcher needed to travel to a far-off place to handle a disease outbreak, they'd have to fill in a paper form, pass it on to the secretary, and wait for it to be signed off and so on. Now, of course, very often they couldn't wait, especially if a researcher has to get out fast to a disease-prone area. They've got to move now. They can't wait for the paper to be signed and signed off and so on. Now, this led to their COO being very concerned about operational risk. Operational risk was really a big problem because often they wouldn't be able to track their business processes. They were using emails, paper, spreadsheets, and they never really knew where anything was at any one time. I'm sure they'd be okay with me saying that. So they wanted to implement a solution that was a digital solution that allowed them to track where everything was and manage that operational risk. The problem was that they knew they needed a digital solution, but they didn't have a very large IT department, not a whole lot of IT resources, and they didn't have the budget to go away and spend a lot of money on an external company building a solution for them. So they decided to look to NoCode. They came along to us and said, what can you do for us? How can you get us to a place where we can prove that NoCode is going to be the answer? So to start off with, we work with the IT department for them, teaching them up, training them up to build out a solution themselves, which they did, that managed that travel request scenario that I talked about just there. But they also went on to train an additional 8 people in their organization very quickly. And their finance department decided to take on the reins themselves and start building their processes to digitize all the processes in their finance department. This ultimately led to the finance department becoming paperless, and all the processes were built by people within the finance department. That was some years ago now, and they quickly digitized over 120 processes. What they're doing right now is looking to refine those processes. So now they're going back to the processes as time changes, as the business change, as the environment changes, as COVID comes along. Things change, and they have the ability to go back and look at those processes, modify them, track them, and make them more efficient, make them more productive. And that's what they're doing right now. So what FlowForma allowed them to do was achieve that fantastic result of digitizing over 120 processes, when without FlowForma, without a no-code tool, it would have been impossible to achieve that, because they didn't have the IT resources, they didn't have the budget, but by using business developers and using a no-code tool, they achieved this fantastic result. The next one I'd like to talk about is Beaumont Hospital. And Beaumont Hospital is a large hospital in Ireland. They have over 3,000 staff, and they wanted to improve the customer journey. Now, in the hospital's case, of course, the customer is patients. So they wanted to improve the patient journey, to improve the patient experience. And to do that, they looked to digitize processes. Because again, it was an operation that was heavily dependent on paper. And with paper, you introduce delays, and pieces of paper get lost or filed incorrectly, so processes fail. And this heavily impacts your customer experience. So they started off by digitizing processes within the IT department, but then they quickly moved on to forming up a center of excellence comprised of people in IT and clinicians. So the clinicians who are dealing directly with the patients. And that was so important because the clinicians knew the requirements, they knew the problems, and they knew what to do about them. And IT just acted to assist them to achieve this goal of digitizing processes. And the clinicians became a key part in that process digitization. And in doing this, they digitized processes so that they can make those processes more efficient and also reduce the amount of paperwork. A key spin-off of all of this was that with over 80 processes digitized, they managed to save over 900,000 pieces of paper being printed, which was a significant achievement in terms of sustainability, which is a nice spin-off in this case, but also had a significant impact on customer experience. Ultimately, it empowered management to do more with less, because the IT staff were able to do more core IT work in supporting infrastructure, and also the clinicians were able to improve their productivity, giving them more time to deal directly with patients, improving that patient experience. And the next slide, just to talk about CVB Targeting. So this use case is all about improving compliance. CVB Targeting are a large construction project, a very large civil construction project that is taken on by a joint venture, Costain, Vinci, and Bashi Solntage. And these three companies came together to deliver a very large tunnel under the Thames River in London. And because they're three different companies, they operate three different sets of processes. But really, to gain maximum productivity, you want everybody working together. You want all these companies and people in the companies to collaborate, work together, working on common processes. So they looked to get a digital platform that would allow them to do this thing, so that basically they could implement a set of standardized processes that everybody adopted, no matter where they came from, no matter what their original company was. And they went and trained up people to, trained up civil engineers to digitize processes themselves and deliver these processes into the business. There were unusual challenges with CVB because being a civil construction works, a lot of the processes had a mixture of mobile elements and work operations and steps that had to be carried out back in head office. FlowForma allows you to select any step in the process and say that that step is going to be executed on a mobile device, while the next step might be executed on desktop, and the next step might be executed by an external person, external contractor. So you can assign a step to an external contractor and they can complete it. So it really allows people to collaborate, not just within Costain, Vinci and Bashi Solentach, but even external suppliers, external contractors can all work together on the same process, sharing information, sharing data, sharing documents, and all of that is captured in an audit trail. So you can ensure that people are complying to standardized processes and evidence the fact that that's been done. This was a key thing for Bashi Solentach, Vinci and Costain, because they were able to justify back to their purchaser, the Tideway Corporation, that they were spending money wisely and operating most efficiently. Interestingly, during this project, COVID-19 came along. And COVID-19, of course, can have a very large impact on any business. But CVB Targeting were able to deal with the situation very easily by building processes specifically to handle COVID-19. So they're able to build processes for people returning to work and so on, for people taking breaks from operations. But also because they have so many digitized processes, that the actual impact of that was much less than if they'd stuck with paper. So as COVID-19 came along, there were lots of changes, but because they'd already digitized a significant number of processes, the impact was very minimal. The next one I'd like to talk about is, excuse me, my slides are skipping just like Rob's there, apologies for that, is automate for outcomes and improve worker productivity. So the use case in this example is Abingdon and Whitney College. Now Abingdon and Whitney were really looking to, unlike Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, risk was not an issue for them. They really wanted to improve productivity, improve productivity and reap rewards out of getting more for less, basically, by optimizing their processes and demonstrating that saving. The key thing for them was they were able to demonstrate that they were saving money over what had gone before previously. So one of the things that they required a digital system to do, in this case FlowForma, was to capture all the information and all the productivity statistics on all the processes that they digitized. So it wasn't enough simply to go from paper to digital. They wanted to actually prove that, yes, some saving had been achieved. So they went about digitizing processes. They trained up some apprentices so that they could digitize those processes essentially using cheap labor. And then they were able to digitize the processes, put them in place very quickly, and measure their performance. And as they measured their performance, they introduced refinements to further improve the processes. They then did a detailed analysis of before and after. And you can see some of the stats in front of you here. I mean, on trips and visits, the trips and visits process, they saved over 1,600 hours, while student update forms were over 1,300 hours, and task-based assessment 620 hours. So these are significant savings that when you add them up, basically the aggregation of small gains really becomes relevant here. When you automate at scale, when you set out to automate at scale, every small saving is significant and every small saving adds up so that the saving overall becomes really important, really significant. So that they save several people, the equivalent of several full-time employees through the implementation of FlowForma. It's such an important thing that indeed all of our customers see that when you automate at scale, you make big savings. Now, automating just one single process, yeah, of course you can measure the savings on that, and yes, they're going to be rewarding. But really the big win is when you can automate at scale. And the only way you can automate at scale is to implement a system that allows you to do things very quickly. So a typical process in FlowForma takes 2 to 4 weeks to implement and put into production. So in 2 to 4 weeks, you're achieving a certain return on investment. Now, if you do 1, you see a certain level of return. If you do 100, that level of return is significant. And we have companies like Liverpool School, for example, and another one will be the A14 project, who automated 100 processes, and the overall saving is very significant. Also, when you set out to do this, you'll always get some surprises, because it's all well and good measuring what you save, and you'll know at the outset you're going to save, well, at least 50% by digitizing process. But you'll get some surprises. Occasionally you'll win the lottery. Like I remember on the A14, they implemented a process that saved over £2 million. They implemented another that avoided a £10 million penalty and so on. So really the savings can be significant and surprising. And you won't necessarily know that at the outset. But if you set out with a program that where you're intending to automate at scale, you can be guaranteed of large savings in the longer term. Okay, just a little some closing remarks there. Sorry about this. A little bit about FlowForma. Well, FlowForma, the company, well, we're an award-winning process automation tool, and we've got well over 200,000 people using FlowForma across 20 countries. So we spread around the globe from as far afield as New Zealand across all the way around to the west coast of the States. And we're seen as revolutionizing the BPM space because of our no-code approach, where, just as Rob was saying earlier, from the very outset, we focused on no-code. We focused on those citizen developers, ensuring that you could achieve very significant results without the need of involving IT in your development process. However, what you'll find if you go to our website, if you speak to us for a demonstration and so on, is that we fully support IT in the process. So just like the democratization approaches and the federated approach that Rob was talking about earlier, we allow you to put in place guardrails that ensure that your processes are compliant and involve a minimized risk, so that you can separate out production environments and development environments and so on. We've had some global recognition from Forrester, our friends, and Microsoft too. We're a Microsoft Gold partner, and we've had some extensive positive reviews on various review sites. I'll let you look into those yourselves. Okay, just to talk about our customer base. Our customer base is very broad. So we talked about customers in over 20 countries, but we also have customers in many, many different sectors. So the whole theory of digital process automation is not designed for one particular sector or one particular company. It's a general approach that really affects everybody. Everybody wants to be more agile. Everybody wants to be able to respond to change faster. And that applies to any company, big or small, in every sector. You'll see some of our examples here, like Aon, a very large insurance company. They're using our software to manage contractor insurance. We have NG Bailey in construction, Maverick again in construction, and the NHS is the health service. We have common use cases in the health service. We also have some very large projects like Inland Rail in Australia, which is another very large construction project that is committed to using FlowForma as their DPA platform for a period of 10 years, which is the length of the project. So really very significant. You'll get other people like Ahold Delhaize, who are a completely different sector, using it for product development. So really a wide range of uses across the board. Okay.
Thanks for that, Paul. There was some really great case studies in there, and thanks to Rob as well for the research, and I think they lined up really nicely. So what we'll do now is we'll just move forward to a Q&A. So we've had lots of questions come in already. If anyone still wants to ask Rob or Paul a question, please pop it into the chat facility, or into the questions and we get those answered. So see people asking about the slides, so don't worry, we will send you the slides on the recording first thing tomorrow. One question here from Jill. So she's saying, thanks for the case studies, really good insights, but can you give me your top 3 tips for digitizing? So Rob, I might get you to give us a quick answer, top 3 tips for digitizing, and then Paul, if I could get the same answer from you as well, that'd be really helpful.
So I would say the first thing we want to do is we want to start digitizing, right? So we want to get something into the hands of people to give them a sense of the art of the possible. Probably if we can do this with a little bit of, if not IT support, at least, IT awareness that this is going on, so that we can kind of confine these things to, to a safe space as a starting point, and then start to actually take some of your less efficient processes and put them online. So that would be tip number 1, is do something, digitize something. A tip number 2 would then be to work closely with IT. Don't work behind their backs, right? So make sure that they know what you're doing so that they can provide the proper guardrails, and make sure that they can expand the scope of the capabilities that you're using in a logical progression. And then the third tip, I think, would be to IT, is that this is real, this is happening. And while these experimentations are going on, while the business is understanding the power of digitization, you're understanding how to be able to do this at scale. So that would be the 3 that I would start with.
Thanks, Rob. And Paul, how about you? What would you advise?
Yeah, I closely align with Rob there. Certainly number 1 for me is get started. So you really have to take the plunge and do something. And when you do something, you can demonstrate to other people of its effectiveness. So really getting started is a key thing. Digitize that first process. I always talk about going for the obvious one, the one that everybody complains about. Try and digitize that. And then start to build momentum. So show evidence that, hey, you know what, this has had a positive effect, and show that to everybody. Show that to other departments, show that to your peers, show that to IT, that actually this has actually been a success. And then ultimately form a self-sustaining community. So what that means is building up a center of excellence, involving IT, just as Rob was saying there, and actually have a community of people who are supporting each other in the push towards continuously digitizing processes.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So next question, Paul, I might send your way. So Jenny is asking, does FlowForma have a mobile app?
Sorry, say again, please.
One of our attendees is asking, is there a FlowForma mobile app?
Oh yes, a FlowForma mobile app, absolutely. Yeah, FlowForma is available on mobile for iOS and Android devices, and FlowForma kind of uniquely, when you build out a process, it's immediately available on a desktop or mobile. So you don't have to specifically build your application for mobile. FlowForma just adjusts automatically to work on mobile devices. So yeah, absolutely, there's a FlowForma mobile app, and we have lots of mobile specific functionality as well, like you can capture GPS locations and so on. More detail. We can probably go through that in a demonstration, but yeah, we absolutely support mobile.
Very good, thanks, Paul. A great question here from Oliver. Rob, I might send this your way, but Oliver is just saying that, in his business, there's very overcomplicated processes. There's a mix of paper, proprietary software, so they want to digitalize. But he's saying, on one hand, they want to digitize. On the other hand, there's little willingness to simplify the business processes. Any tips on what to do in his situation?
That's a hard one. So yeah, that gets back into the conversation around change management in the more mature organizations. And if we kind of go back to the wheel of all the people that were involved from an organizational perspective, this is where some level of executive support is really valuable, right? Somebody that can cut through, and say, this is inefficient, we're going to do this, because it's a strategic objective of our organization. So, so that's from a support perspective. You can't get management to do something where there's no incentive for them to do it. But on the ground, when you're actually working your way through this, there are people who understand process, right? And they're very much coming back into vogue, right? So the whole part of what's happening around this whole move towards wide scale automation is a revisiting of business process reengineering. So for those of us who are old, maybe Paul and I will remember this. But Michael Hammer talked about business process reengineering 25 years ago. And it kind of was in vogue for a while. We were thinking about it a lot, and then it kind of fell by the wayside. It was a little too heavy. It was a little too big. But now, as we're starting to think about it as a more iterative approach and starting small and getting some smaller wins out of it, it's very much coming back into vogue. And the process expertise associated with that is also very much coming back into vogue, but with an eye towards automation. So, so first off is the recognition that the process is fundamentally inefficient. Secondly is some level of support that says we should address this. And then the next piece, I think, is a combination between business, somebody who understands how to engineer a fundamentally more effective process, and somebody who understands the art of the possible in terms of what you can apply with automation. But there is at the source of this, there's you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink kind of thing. But there's an awful lot of external forcing functions like COVID and other things that are causing us to rethink that hesitance.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thanks for that, Rob. Paul, I might direct this one your way. So Elaine is asking, how long would it actually take to start digitizing processes with the FlowForma tool?
Oh yeah, you can start digitizing very, very quickly. Like when you're coming to us, what we'll do is we'll engage with you, talk about your requirements, identify a specific process pain point that you have, and then we'll build you a proof of concept. So we'll actually get you started. And then you can take that and modify yourself. We specifically have a customer onboarding program where we get you up and running as quickly as possible and make you self-sufficient within a few weeks. So the whole idea is that you get an end result in a short time frame so that you're seeing that ROI, and then you can use the ROI to actually drive further process automation later on. So you can get up and running very quickly. Think about a time frame of kind of 3 to 6 weeks. That's when you should have your first process in production using FlowForma.
Okay, thanks, Paul. A question here, I think, for you, Rob. So we have a question here around, what are your predictions for automation in 2021? Have you any insights that you want to share with the audience today?
So we're working on the assumption. What we'll do in terms of the upcoming survey that we do on a regular basis is, our hypothesis is that low-code digital process automation trends are coming together, that they are becoming, more widely adopted and in fact pervasively adopted, and that the tools that support that, which are not necessarily tools we talk about here today, but things like process mining, things like diligence associated with process modeling and process documentation, that these things will become, more widespread. Will it happen in 2022? Probably the automation piece will take a big step forward in 2022. In terms of kind of the DNA of being better at identifying process optimization opportunities. I think that will probably be a little bit more emerge a little bit more slowly, but I think we take that first step into this world in which the business people start to become active partners in helping us drive the automation. So that's our assumption going into 2022. The anecdotal data, particularly after COVID, is that we're getting a lot more requests from organizations across the board about how do we routinize this? How do we make this part of our normal software development cycle? How do we start to democratize development within our organization? So, it's we can call it a prediction, but it's actually a hypothesis that we intend to continue to try to prove out.
Okay, thanks, Rob. We have a few questions here about integrations, Paul. Maybe you could explain to our audience how they could integrate FlowForma with other systems that they use.
Sure. FlowForma, first of all, to say it can run without integration, and you're generating that ROI without any integration at all. It's important, I guess, to say that. But when you want to integrate, features are there. So you can integrate using a variety of means. Obviously, it integrates with Microsoft SharePoint, which it uses as a database. But it also integrates then with SQL databases, and it can integrate with other applications via a number of different means. So one of them is Microsoft Logic Apps. Another means would be Power Automate. You can also integrate with other applications via web services. So there's a wide array of integration options with FlowForma. And what we normally do is we have a consultation with you, and we'll actually advise you on the quickest way, basically, to integrate your applications. We have several connectors built as well for integrations as well. So really quite a lot of options.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more question. So this person's actually directing their question at you, Paul, but maybe we could get an answer from both of you on this. So this person is asking, should an organization start with the traditional low-code way before maturing to no-code? So Paul, I know you'd have a quick answer on that.
Oh, well, I'll answer that one real quick. Go no-code. No-code, this is the way to go. No, but no-code is faster. So that's the simple truth. No-code is faster. So if you have the confidence that, no-code is going to deliver what you need in the business, then I would just argue that no-code is faster, and I'd kind of leave it there. Okay, but then I'm a bit biased. So Rob, take over.
I'm taken aback by your candor on this, Paul. They're different. They are different, and they serve different needs. And so this would be a question that we would get a lot at Forrester. And what we would ask to try to figure out what the situation is. Do you have professional developers? Are they able to help? What is the class of applications you're trying to build? What is the level of potential sophistication that might go beyond beyond any given no-code applications? Ability to serve those. So so they do serve different needs. They do have some organizational requirements, right? You can't go low-code if you don't have professional developers to back you up, or if those people are not going to be available, or if they're not going to be available in real time. So so you look at the level of functional requirements that you have with the application, and you map them to a no-code tool. And to Paul's point, if you can get everything you need out of a no-code tool, it's going to get you there faster. But the net is, if you go low-code, the world is your oyster. You can build anything if you drop into code. But there's an assumption that you have professional developers and that they're available to support you. So there are two different models. They're both faster than traditional coding, but there are some underlying differences between the two approaches. I think we tried to draw them out in the slide where we described them. There's not one that's better than the other, but there is probably one, if you do a little bit of analysis, that's better for you.
Perfect. Okay, thanks for those answers. We are running out of time. So with that, I'd like to thank Rob and Paul for all their time today. I know a lot of effort went into preparing that deck for our attendees today. Thanks to everyone who joined us and sent us questions. We didn't get to answer all questions, but don't worry, I'll get those questions answered by Paul and Rob, and we'll get the answers over to you as soon as possible. So thanks everyone for joining. When this webinar ends, a really quick survey will come up with just 3 short questions. So I'd really appreciate if you could answer that survey. If you'd like to find out more about FlowForma case studies, please go to our website at flowforma.com. You can also look for a demo or a trial on our website too. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks Rob and Paul, and talk soon. Stay safe. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.